Hello! I want to talk about my time spent with Ruth. It began in February when I decided that I would break up the 4 chapters and preach on them during the 4 Sundays during the month of February leading up to Lent. And I used this book by Ellen Davis to be my guide into bringing the scriptures alive. And that she did. And that is also my experience with the exegesis, is that as I got deeper and deeper into the language and how things are not always so settled in the language, it opened up like another dimension. And I'm trying to replicate that by this very Alfred Hitchcock kind of shot here. What I noticed is that the story could have been named Naomi as well as Ruth. For it really is Naomi's story. I mean, she's the one who has totally broken down, lost her husband, lost her sons in a foreign land. She feels that her name should be bitter because God has found disfavor with her. Not because God is angry with her, but because she disobeyed. She let her sons marry foreigners. She left her homeland. And now she's got nowhere else to go but to go back. And she tells her daughters-in-law, don't follow me, find new love, start over. But Ruth won't let her. And so they go back home, and she tells her friends, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, which means bitter. And in the second chapter, Ruth goes out and she finds work. And she just happens to show up in a field the day that Boaz is there, and he takes notice of her. And we are told that he has heard about her and how this is the faithful one that has come back. And so we go to chapter 3. But chapter 3, we start to see that things are starting to change. Because Naomi, with all the time that she's had, while Ruth is out gleaming the fields, a law that was provided by God that when the farmers went through, they were never to go back over their land again. They were always supposed to leave whatever fell there for those who were foreigners, who were orphans, and for widows, for the poor. That is how God planned for them to be provided for, and that is how Ruth is following behind, but Boaz is looking out for her. She's not aware that he's looking out for her, but he's looking out for her. And while she's doing that, Naomi's got all this time to think about, Boaz and Ruth and Boaz. And so she comes up with a plan, and she tells her, I want you to go on the day where they're doing the threshing. And threshing is when they took the fork and they threw it up in the air, and the wind would just blow all that nasty stuff away, and the grain would fall to the ground. And when the grain fell to the ground, that was, better to process, and you got more money for it. And so they did it outside, and they made it like a big party because it was a really hard work. Now, where am I getting all this information? This book. And so they're there, and she goes there after they're celebrating and having a little bit of wine, and she lays down with Boaz, who wakes up in the middle of the night and finds this beautiful woman that he's obviously in love with. But they do the right thing. They don't want to spoil the relationship. They want to do this right with dignity and honor. And he says, I will settle the matter today. And that is what brings us into chapter 4. That just a few hours earlier, Boaz and Ruth had departed from each other. And he goes to the gate. And at the gate, and these are my verses, chapter 4, verses 1 through 12. At the gate, Boaz is waiting, and just so happens, here comes Alani Palani. And that's the name, Alani Palani. It's gibberish. It doesn't mean anything. We don't even know who the next of kin is, because he's actually not worthy of having his name remembered. His name is not remembered because he's told that Naomi is selling her land and Ruth is here, And he says, yes, oh, absolutely, I'll take the land. And then now here's the funny part. Here's the really cool part. Here's the part. This is where the language gets real muddy, where the grammar is confusing, and we don't know if the word is from with or is it because if you say the word, it kind of makes that sound, which my friend here says that that's intentional. That it's not supposed to be from or with, it's supposed to be a moment where Boaz is kind of like not telling the whole deal to Polani. And then when he finds out that, yes, there's a woman that can be available to have marriage, and we're not even sure if it's you get the land and Boaz gets the woman, or you get both, because again, it's all kind of confusing, and intentionally so. Because we get to use our mind in the story to try to figure out, well, what exactly happened here? But what we also know is that to seal the deal, there's this really strange little custom that happens where Polani pulls off his shoe and hands it to Boaz. Now, it's very similar to a Levirate marriage that we find in Deuteronomy, but not exactly. Again, everything's just kind of muddied, and it just kind of hangs out there. Now, here's what I took away from all of that, is that Polani is the next of kin. He truly is the closest living relative to Naomi. And while everybody else has been hearing about this wonderful woman, Ruth, who has looked after Naomi and how they've been back, where's Polani been? He's the next of kin. He has been absolutely nowhere in their life. And the only time he takes an interest is when there is something in it for him. And so he leaves the story disgraced. We don't even know his name. You might even want to do a little spit on the ground at the mention of his name. But through the kindness and love and grace of Ruth, children do come into the family. There are heirs. The names of Amalek and Mela and Chilion will be remembered. And not only that, these are the ancestors of King David. And that's the most famous, that's the most amazing thing about the story, is that one woman's kindness would lead to a king. But it's more than that. Because this story reminds me of the story of the Samaritan. Because who was the one that was the neighbor to the man who was beaten? It was the one who had mercy. And that's Ruth. Amen.